Today, Ukraine is in the strongest position ever in its history. For the first time, we are united in our attitude towards Russia. We have no moral or historic right to waste this opportunity.
My name is Natalia Yermak. I'm a reporter from the Kyiv Independent, and we're here today with Dmytro Kuleba, ex-Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Dmytro, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Let's start with you have been Foreign Minister for 4.5 years, and during the full-scale invasion. How does it feel for you now to be an observer on the outside, looking in on what's going on in Ukraine now in this really important moment?
It's okay. Actually, I did not notice much of a difference because I keep doing what I was doing as foreign minister, pushing Ukrainian narrative across the globe. And this is exactly what I continue to do in my new capacity, which is the citizen of Ukraine. The biggest difference between then and now is that I am the master of my schedule now, which is a fascinating feeling because I completely forgot how it feels to actually be in charge of your own life and not be in the hands of your masters, your bosses, and your assistants who shape the schedule for you. So today I can meet people I want to meet. I can talk to people I want to do, and I can do events that I want to do. So this is a new type of liberty for me.
What do you think we can expect from the next months? Do you think there will be any negotiations to be looking at?
I don't think any negotiations will begin before the inauguration of President Trump. We will spend the upcoming months in the middle of like a whirlpool of news and comments and leaks coming from all corners about talks. But even now, if you put the noise aside and look at the essence of what key stakeholders are saying, they just keep repeating the same speaking point in different ways. So, but every new headline agitates people. But nothing real is really happening. At least I know I don't see it. Basically, everyone is making the point that we want peace. We will consider different options, and we are constructive towards each other. That's everything what comes from the United States, from Europe, and from Ukraine. Russia has a different stance on this. Russia wants to be backed. This is their strategy. They don't want to make the first move. They want others to approach them and beg them to do something. In that sense, Russia is very consistent.
Speaking of that, we see that Russia does not really have the reason to stop at the moment. They have initiative in some parts of the front line. They have help from North Korea, and they can produce a lot of weapons that they can use in Ukraine. What does the West overestimate Russian willingness to talk about possible peace?
Well, the fundamental problem with the West, and I do not want to overgeneralize it, but the issue is still there. They are always looking for good Russian, for a good Russian, for someone or for good Russia. They continue entertain the idea that you shouldn't be too tough on Russia because we need them in the future and there will be new Russia with good Russian people. And this is where all the messages about it's Putin's war, it's not Russia's, it's not the war of the people of Russia, come from. And this is the fundamental conceptual issue that we are facing, and we have to overcome it. I've been saying to my colleagues, I had been saying to my colleagues even before the large-scale invasion began, that you will have a completely different set of policies towards Russia and Ukraine once you stop looking at Ukraine through Russian eyeglasses. And yeah, we achieved, we made huge progress in that. And of course, the level of pressure on Russia and support to Ukraine is unprecedented. But still, every concept is built on the assumption that today that we will need Russia. I have a different approach. I believe that we do not need Russia. Russia is a highly overappreciated asset in world affairs.
What do you say to people who want to build friendly ties with Russia again, especially in Europe?
It's hard to find someone who would openly tell you that that they want to build good relations with Russia today, but there are people with this underlying argument that the day will come and there will be good Russia. They are completely blindfolded and don't recognize the past. They don't want to analyze the past in an unbiased way and admit that all attempts to democratize Russia failed, and liberal Russia exists only as dystopia. So this is the issue. But when we talk, yeah, I'm trying to bring their attention to history from history of other countries. Russia is not unique in pursuing its aggressive goals. It's a classic 19th century empire. It's a country that wants to be seen and sees itself in terms of the classic 19th century empire. And we've seen it all over the world. We saw it with Germany, we saw it with Ottoman Empire, we saw it in Japan, we saw it in Yugoslavia. And there is only one way how to deprive a country of its aggressive instincts, and that is to take it through the loss on the best, through defeat. There is no other way. History does not give us any example where a war-mongering nation would become peace-loving nation without going through the painful and devastating moment of the defeat. So, which brings us to the point that Russia must be defeated. This is the only viable way of ensuring that the war will not repeat and that Russia will not pose a threat to anyone, not only to Ukraine, but also to other countries. But the people you are referring to, they think differently. They come up with the traditional foreign policy concepts and game playing in politics, saying that there should not be an outcome with a zero-sum outcome for everyone. Russia should get something. We have to think of them in the perspective. And then we end up in this messy intellectual and political setting where partners want Ukraine to win, but they don't want Russia to lose.
How does it look like when Russia does not lose, but Ukraine wins? What do we do that the Russia stops at the moment? What can we do? What can
it
the
just
partners
doesn't
do?
work this way.
Okay.
No, it's not going to work that way. You cannot, because if you make Ukraine win, but Russia doesn't lose, what you get is revanchism. And Russia will immediately undertake another attempt to what they call reach all the goals of the specially military operation. Russia has to undergo a process of painful defeat and reassessment of itself. Russia is the only empire that survived Second World War in Europe. First War, even the British Empire ceased to exist as a result of the Second World War. France lost its colonies and had to go through a very painful process of losing Algeria, for example, something unimaginable for French elites and public back then. Everyone has to go through this process if we want country to be peace-loving. If it doesn't, I just don't see alternative ways. So if we have Ukraine winning but Russia not losing, it means we will have a pause, but not the end of wars in between Russia and Ukraine. It will be just a pause before the next war starts. If you have something in the middle where, diplomats like to say that a good agreement is when either everyone walks out from the negotiating room happy, or everyone walks out of the room unhappy. Then it was a good deal. But if both Russia and Ukraine walk out of the negotiating room unhappy, this is again an invitation to revanchism for both sides. because Ukraine's potential for revanchist policies towards Russia in midterm perspective should not be underestimated and written off.
What do you mean exactly?
I mean that the next generation of Ukrainian politicians will be focused entirely on the recovery of Ukraine after the war, but the generation after them will come to power on the slogans of revenge, of revanchist slogans towards Russia. Retake territories, make Russia finally pay. The moment we will be up from our knees economically, you will see these arguments being played out in domestic politics.
If we can talk about domestic politics a bit. We have this narrative that is also visible through publications in the international media that foreign ministry is sort of sidelined in talking and negotiating with partners about getting weapons, and the main role is played by the presidential office, in particular that Andrii Yermak, the head of presidential office, has a lot of influence. Is that how you felt when you were in the foreign ministry?
Listen, politics is a power game, and politics is also a team play. So you have to seek balances without crossing the red lines. Essentially, diplomacy is about your ability to negotiate and agree without crossing your red lines. And one of my former bosses many years ago told me that there is only one thing worse than diplomacy, and it's domestic diplomacy. And trust me, domestic diplomacy is no easy business in any country of the world. But as long as, but I didn't feel hurt or compromised as long as I felt that I could be helpful and I could deliver and I could be in the middle of the fight for my country. So everything else is just, as I said, is just game power.
But this influence that Andrii Yermak has both on inner and outer politics, do you think that it hurts or helps Ukraine?
Listen, I understand your interest in this question, but I left it all behind. I don't even follow developments at the ministry, or I do not follow Andrii Yermak on social media, because I only follow the president because he is the one who delivers the message. And if you know how the system works and you read his message, you don't need to follow anyone else in our country. So since I know how the system works, I follow him. So I just lost interest in this power game, and I want to take a rest from it and focus on something more important. Let the new minister help the relationship with the office of the president. For me, it's over. I turned this page.
We have a lot of talks abroad as well. We see that people talk about how Ukraine can have elections next year, possibly. Do you think that you will take part in that? Will we see your name on the ballot?
I don't understand actually why people are so obsessed with the idea of elections, because even like a couple of days ago, one of the Ukrainian politicians, clearly in anticipation of elections, posted on TikTok an outrageous message addressed to what he believes is his core audience. And it sparked like an enormous standoff in the society, and everyone was talking about it and crushing him, and his supporters were firing back. But I mean, is this what we need in the middle of the war, when the destiny of our nation is being decided? I don't think so. I believe that elections can only take place after the war ends. And while I want it to end, and I hope that the leadership of Ukraine, together with our partners, will succeed in ending it within months, as some pundits in Ukraine speculate. But I just don't see that coming. I mean, I can be completely wrong, and I will be happy to be wrong. But I believe that even these preparations for elections that we already see in the media space, they harm Ukraine, because they sow divisions. they ignite people. People are emotionally exhausted. And political fights is clearly not something that we need in Ukraine now. We have to fight against the common enemy and not each other. So to cut long story short, I don't think that elections is a viable option at this point. I'm not considering taking part in it because I think that elections will have to take place after the war ends. And everything else is the future. I'm not a wizard to project my future. For the time being, I have clear goals set. I'm working on them and I'm trying to be helpful to my country.
And you mentioned that you don't see the war ending over the months after, let's say, Trump is inaugurated.
I will be very surprised if it happens. I don't have access to like in-depth secret talks taking place on this matter. Maybe things look much better than they seem. But if I look at the intentions and the actions of the stakeholders, I just can't imagine. I just don't see why Putin should even agree to that from the very beginning. So let's see how it goes. But we have to believe in magic. So maybe this is something that is going to impress us in the coming months. But I believe that today's talks about holding elections in Ukraine, like in spring or somewhere, they just harm our war effort. That's my position. I do believe in the power of elections. I do believe that Ukraine needs elections. We have to remain a democracy. This is like fundamental for our future. But I just don't see that coming. I mean, the elections in spring.
If we can also address this question of what does it take to make Putin stop after we have inauguration of American president. Do you think, like, we had this idea that sanctions are going to make it too costly for Russia to continue the war and they will stop at some point? We're not seeing it happening now. Is that because sanctions don't work, or what can we do to make them work?
Sanctions don't work is a Russian narrative. Sanctions do work. The perception problem that we are having is that people believe in magic weapon. That there is one single decision or one single weapon that can change the course of the war, and the headline will be, oil sanction, a game changer, or long-range strikes in Russia, a game changer. But that's not how wars are being fought. Victory in the war depends on a complexity of factors. Every piece has to be in place for the puzzle to come together. And sanctions, political isolation, support, providing Ukraine with weapons and financial assistance, resolve to deliver a message to Russia that you're not going to get what you're looking for. When all these pieces come to strengthening Ukraine from the inside, when it comes and shattering Russia from the inside as well. So this is also an important element in it. So when all these pieces come together, we will have victory. As per sanctions, they only work. They serve their function in two cases. When you keep introducing new sanctions, stepping up pressure on the sanctioned country, and when you continuously and regularly close the loopholes which are used for the circumvention of sanctions. So these two things have to walk hand in hand. Unfortunately, we see desynchronization. I mean, people read in the news, people read the headline in the news, like the European Union approved new set of sanctions. People feel relieved, something is happening. But if you look deeper into the list of what was adopted, I mean, this is not like a really damaging stuff for them. Countries agreed to step up their efforts to fight the shadow fleet of Russia. Good headline, everyone is happy. But in the meantime, while countries agreed, and then they will define, and then they will begin to implement, and then they will realize that something is going wrong and they have to to strengthen their measures, Russia will keep selling its oil. So the key to Russian economy is, of course, revenues from oil. This is fundamental, and it would be huge help if Russia could be stripped of its oil revenues. But is this kind of the only element that can help Ukraine win? No, it is not.
But does it mean that the countries talking about stopping Russia getting revenues from oil just can't keep up with the methods that it finds to go around the sanctions? Or they are not very resolute in employing the sanctions that will actually make a difference?
Well, oil market is very peculiar in historical retrospective, and we've seen many different cases in that regard. Yeah, I think so far, oil-related measures were half measures. They were not real measures that could deprive Russia of its access to oil revenues. And this is one, and the reason for that is what one could call global energy stability and the balance of power among oil exporters and regulators.
I would like to also talk about another Russian narrative that seems to be on the rise now. It's still in power about if the Western partners give Ukraine a lot of weapons, they will cross the Russian red lines and Russia will do something terrible. And they do believe it. And this is why they are stalling on providing Ukraine more weapons, even though this is a lot of what you were doing as a foreign minister, going through these negotiations. Why is this narrative still very powerful? Why do they still believe it? Is this a real thing, Russian red lines?
Well, it brings us back to the very beginning of our conversation. It comes exactly from there. It stems from there. Every conversation we had with our partners on weapons started with no. Tanks, Patriots, howitzers, fighting jets. Every single conversation started with no. It's an escalation, it's not what you need, it's too complicated, it's going to take too much time. We turned every no into yes and unlocked these options. But we still hear the argument of non-escalation. The problem is that, let me use a buzzword here, it's a very politicized term, non-escalation. You have a country with a nuclear power permanent member of the UN Security Council who attacks its neighbor with a clear goal of extinguishing this country, I mean destroying it to the ground. This is called escalation. Everything the country that defends itself takes in the exercise of the right to self-defense cannot be considered as escalation per se, because this country is fighting for its life and survival. So when anyone says that Ukraine cannot do this or that because it will be an escalation, basically they invite Russia to finish Ukraine off. I mean, we should be very clear about that all the nice words, calls for peace, let's not feed to the war, let's not escalate. When it applies to helping Ukraine, this is an invitation to Russia and giving space to Russia to continue destroying Ukraine. And second, the escalation argument is flawed for another simple reason, because we see that Russia keeps escalating at any cost. Russia brought North Korean troops to the front line, not in response to Ukrainian actions or to the actions of its partners, but because it lacked its own resources. Russia is destroying our energy system and our civilian infrastructure, not because Ukraine is escalating, but because Russia is committed to achieving its goals. So it's a hypocrisy to think in terms of non-escalation. It's a hypocrisy for our partners, for our key partners, to think of helping Ukraine in terms of avoiding non-escalation.
Okay,
avoiding escalation, sorry.
We've talked about what exactly this narrative means, and can we also address why is it so powerful and what can we do to make it, does it work to explain to people, for example, like Joe Rogan, who makes anti-Ukrainian comments on his show, which are connected with that narrative, to whom you offered to sit down and talk? Does it work to sit down and talk to them and explain these things to them?
Well, I have never been in a conversation that would make someone change his or her opinion after just one interaction. What you can achieve is you can make people think of what they just heard. And in that sense, I do not consider any potential interview from the perspective that I will come, sit down, deliver some brilliant arguments, and people will like, oh gosh, how did we not realize it? It's so obvious now. No, this is not going to happen. But if people switch off the screen, lean on the couch, and like, okay, I have to reflect on this. I have to think on what I've just heard. That is already an achievement. And then you do it like it's a system. You cannot win an information war in one battle. You have to keep working. The work you are doing with providing your audiences with reporting from Ukraine. The work the president is doing by giving interviews to world media. So these pieces, they all come together as a system. But if you do not provide your own argument, if you do not kind of counterattack, then you're going to lose, definitely. This will be unavoidable. So it makes sense talking, but you should to the alienated audiences, but you should be aware that you're not going to change them in a blink of an eye.
What are your goals in this direction now that you're not a foreign minister? How are you approaching that?
Well, every foreign minister essentially has three basic functions: to negotiate, to spread the narrative, and to run the system. So out of the three functions, one is available to me, which is spread the narrative, and I will continue to remain focused on it. I have noticed over the years that while Ukraine is well connected to journalistic and expert community in the West, we have serious gaps and loose connection with Western academia. This is why I accepted the invitation from Harvard University to be affiliated with them. And there will be one more university in Europe that I will be affiliated with. Both affiliations do not imply me leaving Ukraine. Because every conversation I'm having now starts with people who are interested in me, starts with the words, I will continue living in Ukraine. Now make your offer. But this is my effort to reach out to the people who write books based on which and experts read these books and write policy papers for politicians, which politicians pick up and turn into policy. So I spent all the time working as foreign minister, working with politicians, experts, media, but this is the top of the of the pyramid of ideas and perceptions. Now I go to the very bottom of it, to the place where ideas are being born, and this is academia. And I want to influence them from the inside, being their peer, and being able to de-imperialize. My goal is to de-imperialize thinking about Ukraine.
Do you think now it's very imperialized in the academia?
Yes, Ukraine. Well, we have some brilliant people like Timothy Snyder, like Serhiy Plokhy, like Niall Ferguson, some other people who are on the right side of history on this, and they advocate for the for de-imperializing the knowledge about Ukraine. But I think with my background in the academia and my understanding of the reality on the ground, I can join their ranks and be helpful in shaping what Westerners, or how Westerners see Russia and think about it. And so this is my kind of first block. And the second is, of course, public and non-public speaking. So I'm invited to different conferences and behind the closed doors meetings, brainstorms, sessions, where I can influence what experts advise to politicians when it comes to Ukraine. I was in one of such meetings, just as an example, where where the majority of participants favored the proposal to Trump to put NATO membership on hold, for Ukraine on hold, for the sake of reaching peace. And after hours of deliberations and my engagement with them, we left this position behind, and we actually advised, we came up to the advice that Trump should support Ukraine's membership in NATO. So these are kind of things and influences that I'm now engaged in.
Why should Trump support Ukrainian membership in the NATO?
Because it's the only way to prevent the next war. So in a short-term perspective, you can reach a ceasefire without Ukraine's membership in NATO. But this will not mean ceasefire is not the end of the war. I mean, it's something, and we would all be happy to see the war coming to an end. But ceasefire is not the end of the war. But once you bargain membership in NATO for a ceasefire, you lose the opportunity to end the war. And why and prevent the next war? Why NATO is the only viable way to achieve that? For two reasons. Because first, if whatever we know of Putin, he will attack NATO only if he defeats Ukraine. If Ukraine comes out of this fight as a winning power and joins NATO, the combined military force of the alliance against Russia will be invincible. Second, because, as I already mentioned, I anticipate in the prospect of maybe 10 years or so, I anticipate the emergence of revenge-driven politicians and political forces in Ukraine. And it may sound counterintuitive, but the only way to prevent Ukraine and hold it back from waging a war on Russia will be to have it in NATO, to make it bound by legal obligations of not exposing its allies to the risk of the war with Russia. So yeah, this is where I stand. I mean, bargaining NATO for a ceasefire is a cheap deal. NATO is the only way to end the war conclusively and prevent future wars.
Does it mean that it might mean that some Ukrainian territories stay occupied?
No one can tell you now what will be the parameters of the deal. History has many lessons when both territories had been occupied for decades and then liberated by their motherland power, like Alsace, for example, in France. There are other cases as well. One of the most popular references in Washington these days is, of course, the Korea example. Those who are more Ukraine, who lean more towards Ukraine, they prefer to bring up the West and East Germany example. I prefer the Alsace example. So there are plenty of cases in the world when that you can learn from when it comes to territorial control. But the question remains this, or Azerbaijan and Armenia, for example, in Nagorno-Karabakh. The question is this: if a nation remains resolved and committed to the goal of restoring its territorial integrity, it doesn't matter how many years it will take. If a nation learns over time how to live without these territories, then this is also a possibility, and we don't know in which direction the Ukrainian society will follow. Today, what we see in the polls and what we see in the people's reactions to the war, it seems to me that people set the people of Ukraine set the bar very high in their expectations of what victory is. They say, like, restoring 1991 border, that's what we want. But in fact, what is happening is that if you read answers to other questions and put them all together, you see that my impression is that the people of Ukraine delegated the right to define a victory to the leadership of Ukraine, while reserving the right to disagree with how victory is going to look like. This is my interpretation of where Ukrainian society is.
So do you mean that it's quite divided in what it wants out of victory?
No, it's not divided. It's quite to the contrary. It's united. It set the bar very high. We want the victory that will consist of reaching the borders of 1991, but we are not having any conversation in our society on what other ways of winning are. Everyone, at least I'm not aware of these conversations, like public discussions and narratives of what could be the temporary compromise. Is temporary compromise acceptable at all? Or we are going to fight for every square meter of our land, whatever it takes? This is why I'm saying that the public opinion is very clear on what it wants to achieve, because it's easy to tell your leadership that we want it all. This is it. But no one is talking about what could be temporary solutions on the way to ultimate goal. And this is where the society is kind of telling the government, now you are in charge of it, you fix it, you show us what you achieved, and then we will decide whether to punish you or to praise you.
What do you think should be the ultimate goal for Ukrainian society?
Well, if we ever accept in our heads and hearts, in our minds and hearts, the idea that we abandon these lands, this will be the currently occupied territories, this will be the beginning of the end of Ukrainian statehood. Because if you draw a line here, Russia will immediately make the point. Then why don't we draw it 100 kilometers further? So the moment you begin to draw lines, it's easy to begin drawing lines. It's very difficult to stop. Even today, Russia claims that they want full territories of Kharkiv, of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Lugansk regions, even today. Now imagine you even engage in a conversation with them of where a temporary line could be drawn. For our partners, it's an easy exercise. This is how history works. There is always a shining, bright general coming from the West who comes to the land of war, takes the map, draws a red line, and says, "Be it so." We've been there, we know it. Our own land was divided this way after the First World War, and we clearly remember it. But so it's easy for them to draw these lines. But for us as a nation, this is this is a swim or sink moment. But it doesn't mean that there can be temporary solutions on the way to restoring territorial integrity. As I said, what we have to ensure is that the idea of recovering these territories should be part of our national identity and national idea.
But on the way there, can we be in a situation where it's decided for us what the temporary solution is, that the Ukrainians themselves are not the ones?
No, I don't think so. I hold the position that no one can send Ukraine down the drain except the Ukrainians themselves. No decision can be imposed on Ukraine if we do not agree that it is imposed on us. When we look at Ukraine from the perspective of today's headlines in the news and social media, we seem weak, bleeding, and exhausted. But when we zoom out, we will inevitably come to a conclusion that today Ukraine is in the strongest position ever in its history. And we have no moral or historic right to waste this opportunity. For the first time in hundreds of years, we have the state, we have the army, we have the leadership, with all discussions taking place in the media and on the streets. We have national unity, we have clear national identity and political national identity. For the first time, we are united in our attitude towards Russia. And finally, and I deliberately put them in the last place with all my great appreciation of them, we have partners. We can complain 100 times on what they haven't done or what they've done wrong, but they've done a lot for us. And this is the first time in history when we have partners who actually stand by us with all of their shortcomings. So this generation, and I do not mean the age, you're younger, I'm older, there are people older than me. This is not about age, this is about living, this is about being Ukrainian and supporting Ukrainian cause in this phase of history. We have no right to lose this struggle because we are today in the strongest position possible compared to all the preceding generations of Ukrainians who had fought and lost, unfortunately. We should break this vicious circle. We should not repeat their mistakes. And we have all conditions for that. We will. We just have, we have no right not to succeed.
That's right.